So I was doing research on Raleigh, North Carolina for my Raleigh Mudflood series, and I was looking at the bird's eye view map from 1872, which you see here, and I found something that just really sent me down a little rabbit hole, and I think it's something I want to share right away, and it might help you guys in your research. um, and I'll just show you what I found. I was looking at this map, and I'm not going to show you too much of this map because I'm going to do that in a whole nother video, but this map was a bird's eye view of the city of Raleigh, North Carolina, 1872. And you got this right here and right here. Okay, and you can't read it real well. Okay, and I never paid any attention to this right here, but I was looking here, and this writing here caught my eye. It says, entered according to the Act of Congress in the year 1872 by C.N. Dry, Raleigh, NC, in the office of the Library of Congress at Washington. And then I looked back over here and I reread this, and what this says is drawn and published by C. Dry. So that led me on a search to find who C. Dry was. And just to show you my ignorance of this subject at this moment was that I thought that all the bird's eye view maps were done by the same person. I never had put any research into actually the people that made the maps. So here's what I found, and I'm going to share that with you now. So I started looking for this C. Dry, and I came up with a big old goose egg at first, trying the normal Google searches. And so I decided to kind of reverse engineer it and look up bird's eye view maps. And at some point I found this wonderful website here called vintagecitymaps.com, and then this article talking about the history of bird's eye view maps and the Mapmakers. Now, first thing I did was I scrolled through looking for the person's name, and I didn't find it until the very end. It says other panoramic artists. Among other noteworthy panoramic map artists were Rene Chinquin, Albert E. Downs, James T. Palmetieri, Camille Dry, and that's the name, Albert E. Poole, and George H. Walker, who was also a successful publisher of atlases and maps. And I was kind of dumbfounded because this name I'm looking for is like a footnote to the actual article. Like, it's like, yeah, and they made one too. And so I started reading the article. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you this article, and I'll put a link in the description so you can go read it for yourself. But let's just see what we can learn from this. The tradition of perspective mapping flowered in Europe in the late 16th and early 17th centuries. These European town plans, most often portraying major political and marketing centers, were small in size and were generally incorporated in atlas or geographical books. The perspective was usually at a low angle. The streets were seldom identified by name. In some instances, the views were hypothetical, and one pattern might be used to represent various European cities. A modified version of the Renaissance city view was employed by the United States before the Civil War. Like their European predecessors, these perspectives usually of large cities, were drawn at low angles and at times even at ground level. Street patterns were often indistinct. Preparation of panoramic maps involved a vast amount of painstakingly detailed labor. For each project, a frame or projection was developed, showing in perspective the pattern of streets. The artist gathered up any existing surveys and plat maps and then walked in the streets, sketching buildings, trees, and other features to present a complete and accurate landscape. These sketches were then entered on the frame in his workroom. These maps captured the imagination of the American people as air flight did not exist yet, and city views had only been available from hilltop locations. Also popular during this period were views of American cities drawn as though viewed from extremely great heights. Victorian American panoramic maps differ dramatically from Renaissance city perspectives. The post-Civil War town views are more accurate and are drawn from a higher angle. Small towns as well as major urban centers were portrayed. Panoramic mapping of urban centers was unique in North America in this era. Most panoramic maps were published independently, not as plates in an atlas or in a descriptive geographical book. Preparation and sale of 19th century panoramas were motivated by civic pride and the desire of the city fathers to encourage commercial growth. Many views were prepared for and endorsed by chambers of commerce and other civic organizations, and were used as advertisements of a city's commercial and residential potential. In order to pay for the cost of making the maps, an artist would enlist subscribers including businesses, schools, churches, and private residences, and their buildings and homes would then be included as insets on the maps. Panoramic maps not only showed the existing city, but sometimes also depicted areas planned for development. Real estate agents and chambers of commerce used the maps to promote sales to prospective buyers of homes and business properties. Between the 1840s and 1920s, several thousand panoramic or bird's-eye view maps of cities and towns throughout the United States and Canada were produced, and most were produced by Albert Ruger, Thaddeus Mortimer Fowler, Lucien R. Burrali, Henry Welge, Augustus Koch, and Oakley Hoops Bailey. These 6 artists drew the majority of the maps. At least half the maps created were of cities and towns in the northeast part of the U.S. I found that really interesting that the person that I thought, seeing as how I thought it was one person drawing all the maps, was not true. It was several different people from what they're telling us, the official narrative. There were very few maps made of the Deep South. Only 28 maps were done in Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, and South Carolina combined. The South was economically unable to support views of their cities during Reconstruction, and Northern artists probably would not have been welcome. More significantly, perhaps, the focal point of life in the South was the farm or plantation, not the village or town, as in the Midwestern and Northeastern states. Panoramic maps graphically depict the vibrant and in some cases exaggerated life of a city. Harbors are shown choked with ships and often the extent of constituting hazards to navigation. Trains speed along railroad tracks, at times on the same roadbed with locomotives and cars headed in the opposite direction. People in horse-drawn carriages fill the streets, and smoke belches from stacks of industrial plants. Urban and industrial development in post-Civil War America is vividly portrayed in the maps. Quite a few cities have had multiple maps drawn by different artists. some just a few years apart and from different perspectives. Advances in lithography, photolithography, photo engraving, and chromolithography, which made possible inexpensive and multiple copies, along with prosperous communities willing to purchase prints, made panoramic maps popular wall hangings during the American Victorian Age. As late as the 1920s, panoramic maps were still in vogue commercially. These maps give a pictorial record of America's cities during the post-Civil War period. For many localities, provide the sole 19th century map. No other geographic form of this era so effectively captured the vitality of America's urban centers. And this will be the short version of this video. I'm not going to read the artist section. That will be read in the long version of the video, which will be posted on my other channel. And so if you would like to go and read this yourself, you can. The link will be in the description. If you would like to hear me read it, it will be on the long version of the video. And so I will just skip over this section for now because it is really long going through all this, and it will save you a little bit of time because I know this is a little bit of a long video. And then of course we've got down here at the very bottom the artist I'm looking for in my research is down here as a footnote to all these other guys. Here is the actual artist. I found in here the wiki official indoctrination page, Camille N. Dry, also known as Dry, D-R-Y. It doesn't say much, but we got Camille N. Dry, also known as Camille N. Dry, was draftsman active from 1871 to 1904 in the United States. Dry created pictorial maps of various cities, including 110 sheet view of St. Louis, Missouri. 1875. The Library of Congress has a collection of his work. Dry also produced pictorial maps of Galveston, Texas, Anniston, Alabama, and Vicksburg, Mississippi. He worked with Richard J. Compton on the St. Louis mapping project. And I went and took a little peek at the St. Louis mapping project, and it's just massive. Massive AF, just unbelievable. You should go check that out in the Library of Congress. Very, very interesting. But yet again, I believe that this is just one of the many artists that did these maps. And one thing I find interesting is that even though there's many cities done, there are cities that aren't that were done, that were maps made of them, that it's like, why did you do that city? And then there's cities that I think maps should have been made of and they weren't. An example, I'm going from memory, but I believe Fayetteville, North Carolina was a fairly large town, and there's no map of it, and then it burned to the ground, and they I think they had to get rid of a lot of stuff there. But then there's smaller towns that had maps made. So I think what it is that there was some towns that they knew they didn't need to make maps of because they were going to get burned down, and others they knew they needed to create the narrative for. But then there's also some that are still there. Example, I believe Durham, North Carolina, didn't get a map done. And Greensboro, North Carolina, I don't think got a map done. I'm going from memory here, but if these cities didn't get done, they should have, because they're old world cities, and there's stuff there. So there's some interesting ways of looking at this thing, but that's just this is what I had to go through to find this one artist. I figured it was the same person or the same organization making all these maps, And so I am, I have become unignorant of this process now. Okay, so I decided to go to the Library of Congress website. This is their digital archives, and I thought I'd just type in bird's eye view maps, as you see here, and I would just see what came up. Um, and they come up with a bunch. Um, now they're all over the place. Now I want to look at this is something I find very interesting. I'm going to download some of these, and then I'm going to show you some of these maps up close, and I want to show you something I found interesting about them. Okay, so I figured out that I think I can do this and make my point without downloading a bunch of them. So I'm going to look at these directly from the Library of Congress, but you can download these and get higher resolution over here. I don't know what resolution this is showing here, but if you want the big, massive view of this map, you'll go and get this right here. It's called the TIFF. That is going to be the large one. So if you can get that, you'll be cooking with gas. Now, the artist on this one, and this is an important thing I want to make a note of. Let's see, Boston's Bird's Eye View from the north. We got John Bachman, Prang and Company, 1877. Looking to see if it shares the artist's name. Okay, I'm guessing these are the artist names. Okay, so we got those names there. Now let's just get in there and look at it. And I want you to take note of the style of the way the buildings are drawn. Okay. Now this is a very compact view. There's a lot going on here, but it becomes clearer in some of the smaller cities. But I want you to notice the style of the drawing. Okay. Now let me go to another map. Let's just pick one. I'm going to try to stick to. I think this one's a neat one. Check this one out. Let me let that load up. Okay, this is Asheville, North Carolina. Now look at the style. Okay. And if you notice, this is very, very similar to the map that I showed you at the beginning of Raleigh, North Carolina. Yet this map has a very distinct, this is done by Burley, Ruger and Stoner. Okay, we heard those names in the article I was reading. Now, let's go find another one. Let's just keep looking at these for a minute. I'm just going to skip to find, let's look at that one. Why not? Ogden, Utah. Oh, that's interesting. Let's look at Fort Worth. We'll look at that one. Okay, let's load these up. And let's see what the artistry looks like. Okay, yeah, see we have the same, oh, we got the IOOF, International Order of Oddfellows. So these are one of the groups that's responsible, I believe, in my opinion, for covering up the mudflood along with the Masons. But you have the same exact style. Okay? Same style. It's called a bird's eye view. And look, this is a whole different company. And look, they've got the names written here. And this is something I'm going to show a video. I believe I'm going to try to show you a video. I've got to check it out first, see if I can actually show it. But explaining some of this stuff, see, published by Ruger and Stoner. Okay, this is something I learned during doing this research, is that they would go to these businesses and the churches and the government, and they would say, look, we're going to make this map, and it'll be good for your economy, and if you want us to put your name on there, or if you want us to put your building on there, pay us, and we'll draw your building on there, which they would have probably done anyways, but they acted like they were going to charge them to put their building on there. See, there's a church right there. Now that church, it says A. Now you go down to the thing here. Okay, it's not. It's right here. A, Baptist Church. Now see, you would think that that's just on there because it's a major building on the map, but that's not That's not what's going on here. The Baptist Church paid them to put this on here. Okay, and same with the IOOF. They would have paid more money to have the name printed on their building. See, they paid once for the building, once for the letter here, which they'll have down in the little index down there, and they paid again for this, and then they could also be charged more if their building was, how accurately their building was shown. Okay, so I find this very interesting. But what I find, that I think this is the critical point I'm trying to make, is that these buildings, these drawings of these buildings, are the same style. Okay, now I know that sounds kind of like a BS argument maybe, but they're okay. It's the same freaking style. There's very little. See, here's an example. This building right here, they might have paid more to have their building drawn better than, say, this building. Okay. Now this is the official story. I'm not saying any of this is true. I'm saying this is the official story. See, this one is W. Browning. So this is a different artist. Oh. Here's another thing. When you have these insets right here, these insets that you could pay. So the company, this Power Place, Power Dam, Ogden, Cannon Mineral Springs, that business paid this map maker to draw this inset of their business. It's an advertisement for their business, and so anytime you see an inset like that, these are more. These are all paid for ads. And you could pay, and they would draw a much better view of your building. These are all paid. Now, I thought one thing that was tripping me up when I was looking at these maps was, why are they showing certain buildings and not others? Like, why are they like highlighting certain buildings on these maps? And that's the answer. That it's at least is the mainstream answer, is that they paid to have them shown. So I find that really interesting. Here's another one. We got Fort Worth, Texas. And see, again, it's the same style. A little more detail. Okay. Now, I realize that there is differences in the artistic work here to some extent. That I do realize. But what I'm saying is, in general, they're very much the same. And I think that's important. I think that's an important clue. Okay. Got Great Falls, Montana. Okay. Same freaking stuff. Okay. American Publishing Company. Okay. All right. Let's look up some more. Let's see. Denver, Colorado would be interesting. Let's look up Louisiana. Go to a different city. Load that one. So right there, and let's see, Memphis, Tennessee. That sounds interesting. Let's see. I don't need to show too many of these. This is kind of it's kind of repetitive. Let's see, Chicago. That might be interesting. Okay, let me get these loaded. Okay, we'll go look at this first. This is Burlington, 1889. Who did it? American Publishing Company. So this is done by the same company as the other one there, but you got the same. Excuse me. You got the same style. Okay, same exact style. Now I may be overreaching here, but okay, this is also American Publishing Company. Okay, same style. Okay, what I'm trying to point out more is that you got Eagle lithographing company. Okay, you got different artists here. Okay, wow, that's really tight. And here again, it's the same kind of style. It's almost like it's a it, I know what I'm thinking. Memphis, 1887. Here's another. This is Henry Welch. Okay, this is Memphis, Tennessee. It's the same style. These are different artists. And here's what I think is going on here. It's like the controllers, that they have this group of artists that are tasked with creating these narrative maps of these cities, and they were shown. They were probably, because they all weren't done at the same time. They probably handed it down, and they probably said, "Okay, here's how we do it. We draw the buildings like this. We don't put a lot of detail into it unless maybe we're paid." But it's all the same style. Every one of these, there's a little bit of difference. A lot of difference I see is in the roofs, and it's easier to see the similarities on the maps that aren't as congested. But I think these are like a, a it's like an organized cover up of these cities. Sorry, this Library of Congress, it gets kind of funky. There, so it goes. If you get on the site and it doesn't go, I'll leave a link to this too, so you can go and look this up yourself. But I think I do think that there were multiple artists. I do think that's true. But I think that they were all working under the same umbrella, under different names, just like the architects that supposedly built the building. See, it's the same style. I mean, to me, it's obvious. See, this is a whole different one. It to me, it's very obvious that this is, a system of creating a narrative, and the way the views are drawn, the street layouts, and how they put the names on them, and how they another of the things is, this one doesn't have it, but how you have the numbered things down at the bottom, I think is a telltale sign. Here's one right here. Pueblo, Colorado, 1890. I think, you see this. I mean, this style, where you have the names of the things. It's all, see, that same style. So I think this is a coordinated effort to cover up what was here.
You may have probably seen these maps of the olden days. They are normally called bird's eye views and are often considered to be whimsical portrayals of what old communities may have been. However, if you consider why these were made and how they were produced, you will discover that they are not whimsical at all. In fact, they are highly accurate maps that depict actual buildings, houses, and businesses of their era and location. The art of making the bird's eye view maps came over to the United States prior to the Civil War. Immigrants from Europe such as Thaddeus Mortimer Fowler, Henry Wellage, Oakley H. Bailey, C.J. Pauley, Albert Ruger, and others did these lithographs. Some perfected what was then called panoramic maps, but later more commonly called bird's eye views. During the war, they would illustrate Union camps. In the years following the Civil War, the art was commercialized by these artists and others who contracted with large publishing houses to reproduce their maps. The price of these is very hard to track down. One good example is found when Pauley was selling bird's eye views of Oshkosh, Wisconsin in the year 1877. They went for $2 for an 18 by 24 lithograph. That's about $54 per sheet in 2022. Their method of production involved a lot of old-fashioned legwork. They would travel to a town. For example, we'll take a look at Racine, Wisconsin. Although this particular lithograph is in pretty bad shape, it's a good example. Then they would contact city officials and explain that their lithograph would portray the community as a prosperous, growing place that was really beautiful. Examples of their previous work would help to seal the deal, and they would obtain street diagrams of the town plus any other materials that would give the artist the true layout of the main streets. From that, they would draw grid lines at angles converging in the distance at vanishing points. All the secondary streets, rivers, and railroad tracks would then follow the same diverging perspective. Next, they would actually walk each and every street, stopping to sketch every house, business, barn, stable, railroad stop, church, hospital, school, and government building. It sounds like an incredible amount of work. However, they only had to sketch two sides of each structure. Many single-story small homes were depicted simply, and a common image was used. Yet others were depicted in great detail. The level of detail was based entirely on the perceived potential of anyone involved in that residence to buy one of the finished bird's eye view lithographs. If it was obviously a low-income residence, the simplest of images would be used. If you were a big business, a higher resolution image was used, because you were far more likely to buy one of the lithographs. Churches were always well depicted, but not for religious reasons. No matter what your income level, in those days, you were likely to attend church. Thus, although your home was seen in a basic form, you were more likely to shell out some money because there in the drawing was your church. Waterfronts were always depicted as bustling with vessels, because that showed that the harbor town was thriving economically. Plus, any underlying maritime industry was keenly represented. As an example, In this 1893 bird's eye view of Superior, Wisconsin, which was the home of the whaleback freighter, there are 11 whalebacks depicted, 5 of which are under construction. Vessels were often depicted accurately. Here we see in the Port Huron lithograph a whaleback properly depicted towing 2 whaleback barges. This is a Pauly image. On the other hand, in the same image, here we see a steamer with 3 smokestacks amidship, other than large sidewheel passenger boats. There was no such thing on the lakes. More interesting, however, is this depiction of the ship reporter rowing out to identify the passing lake boats. Apparently, the ship reporter's office was inland and not easily depicted elsewhere in the lithograph. But they paid their money. Once the basic legwork and sketching were done, the artist would go around to the businesses and ask for subscriptions. Anyone who bought a lithograph in advance would have their business numbered in the drawing and then indexed in the margin. For a bit more cash, you could have your business's name scrolled into or near the image in the lithograph. For an additional fee, your building would be depicted in an inset on the lithograph. Such inset images were highly detailed. Now, for even more money, you could have a banner sash going down the building with information added. Now, I've seen at least one source professing that the bird's eye views were made by artists while hanging from a tethered balloon. Although on its face this may seem plausible, it's actually nonsense. Although some Civil War reconnaissance was done by balloon, by the post-war era, ballooning was largely seen as a stunt done for public entertainment and whatever cash the balloonist could bring in. Additionally, these initial sketches took days and perhaps even weeks to complete, and any modern-day balloonist will tell you that you need exactly the right weather for a single ascent. To put an artist up in a balloon for days at a time simply wasn't going to happen. Now, although some aspects of the lithographs were indeed embellished, such as future development projects that the town had planned, as well as the depiction of streets and landscapes that were amazingly clean, we can now see why these drawings of buildings and locations are so accurate. There was money to be made. The lithographs were not produced in big atlases, but rather were sold as individual sheets. All of the bird's eye view images seen here are from the Library of Congress.
I just want to reiterate that I think that these maps are a tool that the Freemasons and the International Order of Oddfellows and the controllers used to create the narrative and kind of lock it in place. If you look at your bird's eye view, if you're lucky enough to have one of these, you'll notice that they are damn accurate to the date. Now, I personally feel like that these they're not accurate to actually what was there. For example, in this one right here, this is supposed to be, let's see, I think this is number 7, and then you go down, and yes, Governor's Mansion. Okay, the official narrative is that this is the Governor's Mansion. However, this building, I'll get into this in my Raleigh research, but this building was not this big. It was a house. It was a big house, like a 2-story house, but it was not that big. And then over here in what is called Burke's Square, we call it Burke's Square, but it's Burke Square. Right here they picture 2 houses. But today, if you go and look at Raleigh, North Carolina, the Governor's Mansion is this entire square here. Well, the center of it, but this is an entire city block. Is the entire governor's mansion location, and this house is a humongous mansion. It literally takes up um, half of this property, half a city block. It's huge, and I think that that house was already there. Now, I think that this is not what this shows. I think that this is what is called Memorial Auditorium, or at least Memorial Auditorium was here. And then the narrative says that they built it later. I think it was already there. My personal opinion from my research. But this thing can be very accurate, and you can learn a lot of details from these maps. This perspective, another interesting fact is, this building right here is the North Carolina State Penitentiary, which is a 5-story massive structure. Absolutely massive. It's now gone, but its corner is right here. So this corner is actually, you can't see it in this picture, but it's the opposite corner of this over here, and it runs this way. Okay, and then this building is the lunatic asylum, Dorothea Dix Hospital, and this is actually facing the wrong way. If it turned the exact opposite way, it would be facing Raleigh, and it's on the highest hill, and the highest hill is actually about where this picture is, which is kind of weird. And it actually could be possible that they could have used that hill as a vantage point for the to overlook, to get this angle. I don't know if that's what they did, but it's possible. So the actual vantage point of this, if it was higher, would be from this building right here. So actually, in reality, this cupola right here would have been the highest point in the city. But I just find it. I think that I think these maps were drawn by different artists because of the scope, the scale of the work that was done, because there was hundreds of these, thousands, I don't even know, just in America alone, and they are extremely detailed. I know they look simple, but this took a shit ton of work. Okay, this is a lot of work, because they had to go and they had to do diagrams of each one of these structures. They had to map out the streets. They had to note where the trains were going. They had to do all the stuff. Not to mention, they had to not show what was actually there, because they had to hide what they. Here's an example. There is a Mudflood building. Let me get it right here. Moore Square, right here. There is right here. There is a 3 or 4 story Mudflood building right here. It's got pavement light all the way around it. It's completely. It's got a whole complete level under the ground, and they show nothing but some shit little houses. This literally, this right here is where that building is. Now that building is actually possibly big enough to go this entire area here, but this little building represents where that damn building is. So I know this is bullshit. Okay, I know that this map is both truth and untruth at the same time. This was a trolley park back here, but it's gone now. They had another trolley park up this way, but that's another story. But I think that these images, I think this is an agenda, that they had a set way of doing this, and then they had multiple artists. It's kind of like where you have different artists working on cartoons today, and you have, they all have the same style, but they're all working on the same cartoon. Well, each one of these maps are of the same cartoon, the cartoon being the narrative that they have sold us to try to cover up what they've done. So, I don't know, it's just a little piece of data that I found, and I find it very interesting. I just wanted to share. So, I hope that helps, and I'll see you next time. Bigs out.
Say woof again! Say woof again!
I've got one that can see.
This is my kung fu, and it is strong.
See you later.